What is going on, everybody? I'm back and I'm talking helmets once again, hot off my Kask Utopia review, and I'm keeping it with Kask, and I'm going to do a comparison review over pretty much the whole Kask range that's sitting on the wall behind me. That's right, it's the Utopia, Protone, Vellegro, and Mojito X compared and reviewed to help you know which is best and which you should buy. So, let's do it. So, how is this going to work? Well, I have broken down what I believe are the most important factors in a helmet, and I'm going to score each of the 4 helmets from worst to best within those categories. 1 point goes to the lowest performer, 4 points goes to the highest performer. At the end, we tally the score and we have a winner. First up is something that is very easily quantifiable, and that is weight. And before we start, I just want to remind you these are Australian standard helmets, which are heavier than pretty much everywhere else in the world. So that might be why my numbers don't quite match up to your numbers. With 1 point, we have the portly Protone at 300 grams. With 2 points, we have the surprisingly light Utopia at 260 grams. Not bad for an aero helmet. The Mojito X puts in a strong showing at 238 grams, but there is a clear winner, and it is the Vellegro at 215 grams. Next up is the critical measure of comfort. And unsurprisingly to anyone who saw my Utopia review, that gets 1 point. There's very little padding and it concentrates the pressure in very specific parts of your head. Everything has gone into making the airflow through this shell. So comfort has suffered, unfortunately. 2 points go to the Vellegro. Now this kind of works on a similar design for the padding as the Utopia. There's enough to kind of spread the load across your head, but still it's a little bit behind the others. With 3 points is the Protone, which is quite generous with its padding and it's quite thick. They've also placed it quite well around the shell, so I quite like how the Protone feels. But the clear winner is the Mojito X. The padding is quite thin, but it's really well distributed around the helmet, and it has the forehead padding that is missing from the others. It also has the most rudimentary retention cradle at the back that just uses straps, but it actually turns out to be very comfortable. The Vellegro, Protone, and Utopia all have the same style of retention cradle and straps at the rear. But who'd have thought? The cheaper Mojito X actually beats them all out for comfort. Now it is time for the crucial issue of aesthetics. 1 point goes to the Mojito X. It's not an ugly helmet, it's just a design that we've been seeing for a really long time. The first generation Mojito was seen way back in 2012. So it's perfectly fine looking, but it just looks a little dated for a helmet that was released in 2018. 2 points go to the Utopia, a helmet that I think is actually quite good looking for an aero helmet, but I think aero helmets are a bit gooby looking anyway. 3 points goes to the Vellegro. I like its low profile, I like its minimalism. It's not a gorgeous helmet, but you know, it's pretty inoffensive and I quite like it. That leaves the winner as the Protone, which personally I think is the best looking helmet of probably the last 5 years. I love the way it looks. I think it's smooth, the lines are nice, it's well proportioned, there's no gross or funky angles, and they've kind of managed to make an interesting design out of the frontal vents. I think the Protone is an absolutely gorgeous helmet. But what about ventilation and cooling? And the winner of the last round puts in a pretty mediocre showing here, with the Protone only getting 1 point. This pseudo-aero-vented crossover has pretty poor breathability, and it's not surprising when you look inside of the shell. It's a fine helmet for a lot of temperatures, but if it's getting really hot, I'm definitely not reaching for the Protone. The next 2 helmets come out very closely in terms of ventilation and cooling, but I have to give 2 to the Utopia and 3 to the Mojito X. The Utopia is amazing at channeling air through the inside of the shell. As I pointed out in my last video, it's genuinely staggering how much air moves through it. But the problem with that is that you have to be moving at a decent speed for the cooling to be effective. If you're climbing slowly, you do get very hot indeed. The Mojito X is kind of the opposite, where the air doesn't move through particularly well, but because of how many vents there are, it dissipates upwards very effectively. So it is much better on those slower uphill efforts, but it is quite close between the two of them, just for very different reasons. In this category though, the clear winner and taking home 4 points is the Vellegro. There's a ton of vents and the air moves through it extremely well. It is just a brilliant helmet to ride in a hot climate, and I do live in a hot climate in Adelaide with summer days regularly being 35 to 42 degrees. The Vellegro is my summer champion helmet. The next category is a bit of a complicated one. I'm calling it relative value. And this is my way of balancing out how good the helmet is with how much you actually pay for it, because some have been on the market for years, some are very new to the market. So there's this kind of complicated equation where you're trying to chase this kind of strange dollar for dollar value to performance ratio. So this is how I'm kind of trying to tie it all together. So with 1 point and representing the poorest relative value is the Mojito X. And this thing sits way sort of at the top of the mid-range helmet pricing structure, kind of pushing into the top of the range. And it doesn't really perform at the same level as those really top tier sort of pro world tour helmets. So as good as it is as a helmet, it's too expensive. And for that reason, it just doesn't perform that well from a value perspective, as good as it is. With 2 points is the Utopia, and that's not really surprising. It is the newest and it is an aero helmet. All that time in the wind tunnel and crunching computational fluid dynamics is gonna come out to be an expensive helmet by the time you come to buy it. With 3 points is the Vellegro. It's maintained its roughly $300 price for a couple of years now, and I think that's because it's sold well, demand is good, and it's a good quality helmet. But having said that, I think it's a well-priced helmet to begin with. You do get a lot of performance for your money, so yeah, the Vellegro is pretty appropriate. That means with 4 points is the Protone. And the reason for that is it's been on the market for a long time and you can get some crazy good bargains on this thing. Do some scraping around the internet, wait for a good sale, and you can see these things around $200 Australian. And that is really excellent value for a helmet of this quality that's, you know, still being raced at the Tour de France in 2019. So now I've got a lightning round of bonus points and penalties according to things that don't really fit into the other categories. The first, I'm giving 2 bonus points to the Vellegro for its outstanding sunglasses storage vents. The Mojito X, I'm going to give it a bonus point because it has reflective detailing on it. Look on the back of the helmet and you'll see some dots there that just help you be a little bit more seen, and I like that, so bonus point to the Mojito X. I'm actually going to take away a point from the Utopia because of the forehead dents. There's no dignity in forehead dents, so you gotta lose a point for that Utopia. The Protone as well loses a point for the way the padding on the rear retention cradle just kind of disappears. It gradually falls off and you lose track of it. So if you own a Protone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're losing a point for that. All right, so now it is time to tally up the final scores, and drum roll. From lowest to highest, we have the Utopia with 8 points. That might seem like a poor result for such a new and expensive helmet, but this is a very specific piece of kit. It's for racing, for going fast, and it's for people who really want to squeeze out every watt they can. And that just means that the broader appeal is limited. It's great at what it does, but for most people, it's total overkill. Next, with 12 points, is the Protone, a solid effort for a solid all-round helmet. Doesn't really do anything particularly amazing, but it just does a good job across the board. Just edging out the Protone with 13 points is the Mojito X. Relative value aside, this does a lot of things very well indeed. And that means the clear winner is the Vellegro with an impressive 18 points. And this helmet really does deserve it. It's my favorite all-round helmet. I just keep going back to it. I get a lot of helmets through for review, but the Vellegro just seems to stay on my head. So that's it, right? We're done here. No, we are not. Now it's time for the just kind of feelings round. What would I actually tell you to buy regardless of everything I've just said? In fourth place, the Mojito X. I just don't find it that interesting a helmet, and I think if you're gonna spend $250 or more on a helmet, you gotta love it, and it just doesn't really tug on my heartstrings. Third is the Utopia. Again, it's a very specific tool, it's good at what it does, but you know, it's not an all-round everyday helmet. Second place is the Protone. It's heavy, it doesn't breathe particularly well, but as I said, you can find some great deals on it and it looks awesome. Sometimes you have to suffer for fashion, and I still love the Protone. And again, the Vellegro is the winner. I love it, it's great. It gets my gold stamp of approval, and that'll do it. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any thoughts on Kask helmets? Do you love yours? Do you hate it? Anything in between, let me know in the comments below. I've got a full written article on La Velocita that covers everything I just talked about. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Not for helmets, I'll do something other than helmets, and that'll be fun. All right, see ya.